This is the Momentum Educate and Innovate podcast.
Welcome to the Momentum podcast. My name is Lola Gonzalez. I am here with Mary of Futurecast, and we're going to be talking about diversity in construction since we're celebrating EU Diversity Month. So, Mary, introduce yourself.
Thanks, Lola. My name is Mary Whitney, and I am the COO at Futurecast. Futurecast are driving innovation and technology advancement in the construction sector, and we also have a focus on increasing diversity and participation in the sector also. I have a background in social policy, so I have quite an affinity with people on the margins and who are isolated, and I see this as a big challenge within the industry of bringing more diversity, not just women, but people of different abilities, neurodiversity, all of that kind of stuff as well.
Yes. What does diversity in the construction industry mean to you? Why do you think it's important?
I think we have an industry that is predominantly male, predominantly white, and I think when you have the same people in the room, the same kind of opinions surface and the same kind of perspectives surface. And I think you bring other players into the picture, you create a system or an atmosphere or an energy where there's more diverse thoughts and opinion. And I think when you have that, you can think a little bit more critically about how we do things, processes, ideas. And I think women, because of our genetic makeup and I suppose the social responsibilities that are attached to us as child bearers and mothers, etc., that we have an innate ability to multitask and do things differently with the kind of broader perspective possibly. And I think that there's certainly a place for women at the decision making table, but also it's not just women. I do think that the sector could be more accommodating and welcoming to people who are neurodivergent or who have disabilities even. So like, how can we make construction sites more accessible to people who maybe are using wheelchairs, and why should they not be considered as employees who can benefit and who can contribute positively to the sector as well? So not just women. I think it's about being more diverse in general, and I think diversity brings with it just a rich environment of learning and openness and opportunity, and I think it actually benefits everyone. It doesn't just benefit women, it benefits everyone at large.
How does diversity in construction, what is your feelings about it today in Europe in general? And what, if you know, what statistic or trends can we look at to understand better the situation?
So I think if we look at the European average, it's around 10%. If we look at the Irish average, it's around 10%. And I know work is being done. So I'm speaking to people constantly in the industry, people from representative bodies, people from the education bodies. And I know that there's a lot of work being done to promote the industry, to go out and do in-reach in schools, primary schools, secondary schools. I still think that more could be done, because I think sometimes they miss the point. It's not good enough just to have an annual event that celebrates women in construction. I mean, the visibility needs to happen on a kind of more regular basis. So I think if we look at curriculum and curriculum development at the national level, we could start looking at including more female role models in curricula so that kids are always seeing women being represented. And I think similarly in secondary and higher education, we start looking at case studies that include women. We look at videos that include women, because the predominant narrative is always male dominated. It's the men that are coming through, and it's the men that are seen in the pictures, and it's the men at work signs. It's all those little things that I suppose, you know, they're kind of like insidious, as in it's almost like an accepted cultural norm or societal norm. And so when we're kids, we kind of assimilate that information. And I suppose maybe we start thinking that it's not a place for us, because we've never seen associations with people that look like us being represented there. So I think the work needs to start early. And I think once we kind of start building on that, we're building a really strong platform for women to actually know that this is a place where creativity happens, where diversity happens, where there's a dynamism, where you're challenged constantly every day. You have to be a fast thinker, you're moving quickly. And I think anyone who thrives in that kind of atmosphere would love construction.
Yeah, I love how you said we also need to include people with disabilities and think of ways to manage that so that that can enter the construction field.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about your project specifically. I was talking to my colleague Oksana, we were talking about the Ukrainian situation, and one of the things she highlighted was as an issue when they're rebuilding Ukraine, they're going to have to really start thinking about rebuilding it for people with disabilities, because we will see a large section of the male society actually with maimed limbs, etc. So they're going to have to really think about universal design principles in their building design to make sure that buildings are accessible and inclusive for veterans and for people who've been affected directly by the war.
Yeah, that's a very good point and something to think about, definitely. Are there any individuals, organizations in construction in Ireland that you believe are leading the way in promoting diversity that we can learn from?
I think we can kind of take a multi-sectoral approach to diversity. So I think sometimes the construction industry, well, they are doing things. As I said, the visibility appears to be kind of their flagship event, which is the International Women's Day event. And not to say that that's something small, because they had 600 people attend the last event, so it's hugely popular and it is impactful. So they are doing great work there. I think if we look across industry to accountancy, professional services, and they have introduced models that allow women to be more selective about how they work. So they recognise that women have other responsibilities, and that essentially they have pickups and drop-offs and maybe childminders, all of this kind of stuff. It's not every woman, but a good segment of our population are doing this. And so they've recognised that there's a huge demand for accountancy services, whether it's audit or whether it's reporting, whatever. They're saying we have these jobs that need to be done, but we can't find the people. Now, if we employ a model where we ask the women, what can you do? And they say, well, you know what, it would be so beneficial and of value to me if you could offer me working hours from 10 to 2. So I'm there to drop off my child and I'm there to collect my child. And that's all I can really give. So basically they're saying I want reduced hours, maybe 20-hour work week with the hours that I need to accommodate my other life. And, this accountancy firm that I was talking to, they've implemented that and it's been a huge success. A huge success. The work has been done. These people are high caliber, highly skilled, qualified accountants, know what they're doing and are contributing. So it means then that there's not this big backlog of work that needs to be done. They're saying, yeah, well, absolutely. Like, isn't it better to have someone working 20 hours than no hours and getting the jobs done? So I think if we look to that sector, that professional services sector, and see what they're doing and try and emulate that in construction, that would be a starting point. I think there's a rigidity in terms of how they think. I think very rigid and like, oh, well, it's this way and it has to be this way. And it's like, well, actually, there's an absolute evolution of technology now at our disposal and it's continuing to evolve. Like, we just have to kind of keep moving with it because it's moving at such a rapid pace. There's sustainability and all that's bringing with the new jobs and stuff. So, is there really this necessity to kind of stick to this old rigid model that you have to be kind of on site and you have to be there from 9 to 5 and that's it, it's not negotiable. So I really think they need to open their eyes to what other people are doing and learn some lessons and see how it's working and what's effective and try and introduce a pilot and see, could this be the answer to getting some of our work completed? And I think also just looking at the roles, there's a great variety of roles within the industry. So I would say some of it certainly doesn't need to be site-based. There's a lot of stuff that BIM and all these different design models that you could be working from your computer at home.
How do stereotypes impact recruitment and retention in the construction industry? Because I feel like that might be what's affecting diversity as well. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think the stereotypes are changing slightly. I know when I was young, and I used to be a little bit intimidated going by a construction site because the guys would generally do a bit of a wolf whistle or there'd be some kind of commentary as you walk past. So to me, it wouldn't have felt like the safest place. And I'm sure I built a picture in my head of, oh, jeepers, here we go again, like, you know. Now, I would say that doesn't really happen on construction sites now. You know, you've got toolkit talks, you've health and safety briefings, there's a lot of things happening that are really progressive. But the industry would still suffer from a narrative of kind of being dirty, being overly kind of physically demanding, male dominated, which we can't really say is a stereotype because it's an actual fact. And I suppose it's those things, like if you are looking in as a young girl or young woman, you're kind of seeing that the dominant narrative is a lot of males on site and no toilet facilities and no visibility of anyone that looks remotely like you. You know, so even if people of colour or people with disabilities, if you're looking in, you're kind of saying, well, I don't see anyone there that looks like me. So that could be something that contributes to stereotypes. But I do think the enablers now are technology and digitalization and sustainability, and I think that can definitely mitigate some of those and attract more people into the industry. Retention is always going to be a little bit of an issue, I think, as well. There's a drop off. So traditionally in like engineering and architecture, you have a good split of kind of women represented across the board. So you'd have a good representation of women in engineering and architecture, but however, there does seem to be retention issues there also. And it generally is childbirth again, and I know that I'm going to harp on about that, but isn't that kind of a sad picture to think that you're losing people because maybe again the policies aren't there or the supports aren't there to enable them to come back to work and do what they need to do? You know, I think a lot of people, albeit they love staying at home with their baby, of course, for the first year or two, no hassle, but like that they can kind of start moving back towards employment, because like most people like their jobs and like to work, but if you don't have conditions or policies in place that support you to be able to be the caregiver and to do your job, then you know maybe you do have to weigh that up and say it doesn't really work for me.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We need to be more flexible and supportive of mothers, and also I think we have to think about challenges for people of a different background who may not be Irish, you know, challenges in language. And also, as you mentioned before, people with disabilities, the challenges of making everything accessible in a site or in an office. So, yeah, I completely agree with you.
Yeah, and I think I read something recently about, you know, some programs that were introduced like for people with disabilities as well. And then it was interesting to see the feedback from the people with disabilities, because some of it was like, you know, it's nice and everything, but some of it's just tokenistic. And I suppose we have to kind of move from that as well, of like, oh, aren't we great? Look what we do here, as opposed to ensuring that when people come into an environment, they're able to thrive and they're able to do their job well, without it being like, we're like employers of the year here, you know? That it's not some kind of thing just because you're ticking a box. It's actually, you want that person to be able to do their job really well and you want to support them.
What are some benefits that you see from diverse teams in construction projects?
I think it's the variety of ideas and the different opinions that really broaden perspectives and broaden minds. And I think it's not just about gender, like it's about people going to Saudi Arabia and coming back with new ideas. It's people going to Japan and coming back with new ideas. People going to China and saying, wow, do you see how the Chinese do this? Bringing those ideas back. And I think that's where you get this beautiful creative process where you allow people to freely kind of share their experiences and be able to bring those ideas. So that's why it's really important to have people from like different nationalities around the table, because their perspectives could be absolutely at odds with yours, but like that's not a bad thing. That's just learning from each other, saying, wow, I didn't know you could even do it like that. And similarly with women will have a different perspective. Like if we think about design, there's a really good book, Invisible Women, and it kind of points to that, you know, by default, the world was kind of designed for men. And they'll give just an example of like bathrooms in a hotel, for example. And the bathrooms are designed with small cubicles, and you pretty much don't even have room to kind of spin around and like hang your bag. And we know that women need sanitary bins and all this kind of stuff, and need to do a few things while they're there. and yet the design of them doesn't accommodate that. So it clearly shows that sometimes when people are designing buildings that, particularly ladies' bathrooms, that they're not being designed by women, because women would understand what they need from that space. And I think, again, it's really important, like in buildings and in designs, that there is a kind of female input, because whilst aesthetically men might produce this beautiful piece of art and lovely looking building, the women will come in with a different perspective of functionality, of what makes sense. Where am I going to put things? That doesn't make sense. The bin is over there, so now I have to walk 3 meters instead of 1 meter to put the nappies in the bin, or whatever it is. So it's that. It's just those kind of experiences and ideas that can be missed if you just have one train of thought coming through all the time. So that's why it's really, really important that you have diverse thoughts, opinions, ideas, because everybody's learning then, and everybody's probably producing better outputs and better outcomes for everybody.
What strategies or initiatives do you have in FutureCast to promote diversity?
Well, I think at the moment we're about 50-50 in terms of gender makeup in the organisation, and I suppose we're actively involved in these European projects that are focused on women in construction. So our active voice really is coming through and trying to ensure that people know that there is a lot of opportunity within the industry. And I suppose from our own perspective, in terms of what we've done, like we have included flexi time for employees, so we're trying to accommodate people's pickups and drop-offs as well, and we look at toil and reward people as well, so we're trying to be good employers in that regard, of making sure that people feel safe, welcome, have what they need to do their job, and provide that flexibility for women as well.
How can educational institutions better prepare people from diverse backgrounds for careers in construction?
Yeah, so it's actually a good question. And it's a question I'm not going to have all the answers to as well, because I suppose everybody that comes from a different setting, background, country would have different needs. So I would imagine the first step would be to try and identify what those are and identify existing skills, because everybody's coming with their own experiences and skills, and the skills mapping piece would be kind of crucial as well, like understand what they already have and know, and then what's needed to bridge the gap between where they are now, where they want to go in terms of education or employment in Ireland. Language is obviously huge. So if their language is good, then obviously it's not huge. But if their language, if they're struggling, then I would say the first step is really trying to work hard on getting those language skills up, and maybe being assigned a mentor, somebody that's regularly speaking to them, because I've seen that with some people I've worked closely with already, that the language lets them down, and that's not their fault. And it kind of is a bugbear of mine that we are putting lots of supports in place, but maybe not the right supports, because without that English language, it's so difficult for them to do well in a job, or to, and if they're not getting regular opportunities to speak with someone, a native speaker, there's going to be a challenge there for them to integrate properly as well. So I think that's kind of huge. And I think maybe more on the integration piece as well, within curriculum too. How do we ensure that there's a link back to where you're living, your local community, there's a link back to a local development organisation, so that immediately you're being integrated into your new society, and that people are welcoming, and that you know who to go to if you have a problem with your administrative paperwork or healthcare or whatever it is, that there's a person that that's the person to talk to. And I think that would be really important. The curriculum design, again, just being very aware of different levels, and providing plenty of opportunities for different learning styles as well. So employing some kind of universal design learning principles in the curricula. And if we're looking at gender, then being maybe more gender specific in terms of a few more examples of females and different ways of communicating with your audience. So if podcasting is a better format than maybe text, and if it's text, have an immersive reader and have some of those nice user-friendly digital tools that allows people to maybe interpret what's being said or make it simpler, basically,
Yeah, those are all very good points, because we don't have the exact answers, but we can come up with some kind of solution to get there.
Exactly.
Are there specific campaigns or programs you're aware of in Ireland that have successfully raised awareness about diversity in construction?
Well, I know myself and yourself worked on a lovely project there, FemCon. Just give it a plug there now while I can. And that was a really nice project, and it did involve a lot of stakeholders in Ireland. Actually, we did get a lot of people involved in it, and it was positively received, and it was, recommunication, reposted out in LinkedIn's, and I did a podcast myself on Irish Property Radio, and it just gained a lot of momentum. And so I think it was a starting point and a conversation that has continued. As a result of FemCon, I've been talking to Carol Talon, who'd be very much in PR in construction. And Carol then was speaking to another lady, Joanne White, and Joanne has set up Women in Construction Ireland. And that's a really good organisation that's really about working with companies to ensure that they have policies in place that allow women to thrive, that they've kind of signed up to a diversity charter, that they're cognizant of kind of the issues that women face. And really, she's just doing really, really great work, and she's connected with the right people, and she's having networking events, and sometimes it's just even the peer support element, of women knowing that there's other women out there maybe facing the same challenges and how to overcome them. So I think that's been really, really good. And there's loads of other stuff as well, we're doing another European project, COHER, which is Construct Your Future, and again we're looking to kind of make the curriculum more gender sensitive and gender proof it. And there'll be a mentorship program with that also. And then CIF are doing kind of continuous work there on the primary school and secondary school level. And I'm seeing a lot of things there in the apprenticeships, civil engineer, and that's being led by a woman in ATU, Emma Britton. So there's a lot of kind of good publicity as well around certain programs in construction that are being female led. So I think all of that stuff is really, really important, and if we can continue to build the momentum and increase the visibility of women in the sector, then I'm pretty certain the it's going to go in the right way for getting more women involved.
Yes, I agree with you. We were talking about FemCon, and we worked together in that project, and I loved it. I didn't know much about construction, especially in Ireland, but I learned so much. I got inspired by all the women that we covered. I learned a lot from yourself. So it was a really great, fun, inspiring project. I was disappointed when it ended, but everything comes to an end. And you have continued your work, which is amazing, and I love following the new projects. And we are doing one called Welcome Work, which is about Ukrainian refugees and migrants, basically bringing them into the construction industry. So that was kind of like a follow-up from FemCon. So for both of us, it just brought in new ideas, new projects to inspire people and get them involved.
Yeah, and I think like yourself as well, we continue the story ourselves. And it's funny that our new centre, it's a METAC, which is a mechanical electrical training centre that's based in Ballahadreen, and it's funded through the EU Just Transition Fund, administered by Pobble here in Ireland. And that centre is focused on ex-Peat workers, retraining them and reskilling them in mechanical and electrical. But it also includes Ukrainian refugees and people from Direct Provision Centre in Ballahadreen. And it's been really, really successful. And again, we have to kind of start working with the intros, the local community centres there in Ballahadreen, and there's a lot of stakeholder engagement in trying to ensure that the programmes are fit for purpose and they suit the needs of the client groups, and it's been really successful so far, and we're excited about that. Yeah, really excited about that. And then another project that is just starting is through the Peace Plus programme. So we're a partner in that, and our role is to provide some master classes in green skills And also we will be working with them on their Women in Construction project there as well. So we're
Amazing.
hoping to get 200 women trained over 4 years. So it is really exciting, and it's nice to see that the legacy of FemCon lives on, and we're building and we're continuing to build.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the tour next month because I have the project partners for Welcome Work coming and we're going there.
And we're excited to host you.
Yeah, thank you so much for setting that up. How do you see the landscape of diversity evolving over the next 5 or 10 years?
That's a good question. I would like to see companies walk the walk now. I would like to see it move from talking about it to ensuring actually that, you know, the companies have in place policies that really do look at this. I'm not sure it's good enough to say we're trying, but it's still at 10%. Something has to move that dial, and I think it's kind of like if we look at sport as an example. When I was a teenager, there was definitely no women's rugby. And then maybe in my 20s it started taking off. And now women's rugby in Ireland is huge. So that kind of started from 0 and went to 100 very quickly. So I think it can happen. And you just have to kind of ask yourself what can make it happen. Like if there's a will that's needed. And that's kind of the piece that I see that needs attention. Like there's a will on the part of employers to actually say, how do we make it happen? And I'm not saying, like, I'm not somebody who's like, oh, let's replace men, because I think men are like absolutely part of this conversation. But I suppose what I'd be looking at is kind of like more equal representation in the sector, and not just office-based roles, because even in that 10%, when we look at it and we look at the breakdown, the roles are predominantly office-based roles. Mm-hmm. That's not where women are really visible, you know, and that's not where they're really taken serious, because you're still kind of saying, oh, you know, she'll just be doing the administration or whatever. I would like to think that women could see themselves in project management roles in construction, where they're pivotal to everything that's happening and they're orchestrating everything. And I think that is possible, but I think the rigidity kind of needs to change. And that's what I mean about the companies walking the walk. I think they really need to look at their policies, their culture in the organisations, and how they maintain their employees, what's their retention strategies, and how do they spot talent, you know, and how do they, like, what's their sustainability strategy, what's their retention strategy, and what's their top talent kind of strategy as well. Because I think, you know, you could lose a really, really good employee because, again, the policies aren't in place there to support them. And it's everything. It's not just flexibility and less rigidity. It's, you know, it's making sure that there's maternity leave benefits in place. It's making sure that their pensions are in place, and all of those kind of things that support. It's not just women, they support families. Like, let's face it, they support families. So it's not just good for women, it's good for families, it's good for men in these organisations as well. And I just think that that's fundamental, really, to ensuring that people stay in these roles, and it'll go some way to addressing the imbalance that we see in terms of the numbers in the industry.
Yeah. Do you have any advice, any final words, anything that you want to say to anyone wanting to become a part of the construction industry?
Yeah, I would say it's an industry that's ever evolving, ever changing. I think the change in the last couple of years has been enormous in terms of modern methods of construction, and I think they're really bringing in methods from manufacturing, which is positive, you know, so lean, BIM, continuous improvement, all of these kind of methodologies. And I think that it's a really dynamic industry where there's so many different things happening and so many different variables at play that I think it's so exciting. Like, if you're somebody that's just loves a challenge, you'll meet plenty in construction, but like in a good way. And you have an opportunity to collaborate with so many different players. I mean, in the end of the day, when you're constructing a housing estate or a commercial building, you know, you're liaising with engineers, with Irish Water, with planners, with just such an array of different people and different skills. And so having the opportunity to go into rooms and put all of that together and map it and piece it together. It's just really exciting, and I think certainly women have a place there.
Thank you so much for coming to speak to us today and giving us an insight into diversity with FutureCast and just in general in Ireland. And so follow their journey, that's FutureCast, and follow all of our different projects to inspire you into construction. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lola. It's been a pleasure.
This is the Momentum Educate and Innovate podcast.